It's the Joe Show. Hello and welcome to the Joe Show with me, Joe. It's the Joe Show. So if you're not aware, this is the show where I read an article a day to keep my stupid away. Today's article comes from the New York Times and it is entitled Trump's Order Targeting Social Media Sites Explained. If you're not aware of what happened, Donald Trump had a couple of his tweets labeled by Twitter with their new label as potentially misleading. Not removed, not edited, but they had a potentially misleading notification underneath the tweet because, let's be honest, Donald Trump is a compulsive liar. And so Twitter decided to start fact-checking prominent people to make sure that people on social media get the facts. And Trump was not a fan of being dunked on, of being checked. So he tweeted something that was incorrect, and Twitter was like, block, building kick. That ain't right. Jumping into this, the president wants to narrow legal protections for companies like Twitter after it began appending fact-checking labels to his postings. Written by Charlie Savage, let's see what this says. President Trump signed an executive order on Thursday targeting legal protections that keep people from suing social media websites. The move follows his anger at Twitter over its decision this week to append fact-checking labels to several of his tweets about mail-in voting, along with links to accurate information on the topic. Much of the president's order consists of complaints about social media companies and their efforts to flag or remove content deemed inappropriate. This is the explanation of the legal issues surrounding the components of the order that would or might do something. What currently is protecting social media companies? A 1996 law entitled Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act essentially bars people from suing providers of an interactive computer service for libel if users post defamatory messages on their platform. So let's say a user goes on Twitter and says, at so-and-so celebrity touches kids. Twitter can't be held responsible for libel because that user lied about that person touching kids. That's how Section 230 works. A related provision also protects the sites from lawsuits accusing them of wrongfully taking down content. It gives them immunity for good faith decisions to remove or restrict posts that the platform deems obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, excessive, violent, harassing, or otherwise objectionable, whether or not such material is constitutionally protected, which means that they are currently protected from being sued if they remove something that they think violates their platform's terms of service. So then, how does President Trump's executive order target this shield that they currently enjoy? The order argues that if a site restricts access to others' content in bad faith and goes beyond removing the types of objectionable content detailed in the law, it should be deemed a publisher rather than a neutral platform, thus losing legal immunity from lawsuits. If the vision were law, it would mean that social media companies could be sued for defamatory content over what other people post on their platforms. For example, because Mr. Trump has used Twitter to falsely insinuate that MSNBC host Joe Scarborough murdered a congressional aide in 2001, Mr. Scarborough could then accuse Twitter of libel. So, Trump wrote an executive order that pretty much is trying to remove the shield that social media platforms currently enjoy that protects them from being sued from other people acting a fool on their platform. How does this order impose this understanding? Specifically, the order directs the Commerce Department to ask the FCC to develop regulations addressing whether social media firms lose Section 230 immunity if they restrict access to posted material in bad faith. That could include actions that are deemed deceptive, pretextual, or inconsistent with the provider's terms of service, the order said. The FCC, however, is an independent agency outside of Mr. Trump's control. It is a 5-member panel that has 3 Republican and 2 Democratic appointees. So the order, which I also read through, does have a request to the Commerce Department to talk to the FCC to investigate whether or not social media platforms should still receive Section 230 immunity. Would this executive order make any legal difference? Probably not, legal experts say. First, although the FCC oversees the communications law where Congress envisioned its regulation, like rules for telephone companies, the order does not explain why the agency would have any role in authoritatively interpreting Section 230. Courts, not the FCC, handle lawsuits. This is just noise. It's not a hard question. It's not a toss-up. It's obvious that the FCC does not have jurisdiction. What does Trump want to count as inappropriate editing? The executive order does not spell this out in detail. Given the order's timing and context, the most obvious notion is that Mr. Trump is trying to stop Twitter from flagging his tweets as inaccurate. The order complains that he was singled out and Mr. Trump told reporters that the fact-check labels were political activism. But it was not clear how the details of the change envisioned by the executive order clearly map onto that complaint. Twitter has not removed or restricted Mr. Trump's messages. That's important to remember. Twitter has not removed or restricted any of Donald Trump's tweets. None of them. What else could the executive order do? It opened several reviews that could result in some sort of later action. Mr. Trump required the head of each executive department and agency to produce a report on how much advertising money it spent on online platforms. The Justice Department is then to review whether such platforms impose viewpoint-based speech restrictions to assess whether they are problematic places for government speech, an implicit threat to ban taxpayer-funded marketing on them. So, what does this all mean, and why is it happening? The other day, as I said, Trump tweeted about mail-in ballots causing fraud, and Twitter put a little notification under it that said, "This tweet may contain misleading information. Get the facts on mail-in voting here." As we all know, Trump is compulsive liar. He lies about everything. So Twitter has began fact-checking, not just Trump, but everyone on their platform. How I view this is kind of mixed. So I actually agree that Section 230 grants too wide of an immunity to these platforms. I think that these platforms, specifically Twitter and Facebook in this case, have more influence and power in our lives than the government is willing to admit. We're pretty much a cheap date. We have signed up for free to their platform and let them into our lives as a data point. They feed us information, and then their algorithms know that the best content is the most controversial content. So they'll feed people content that will set them off so they spend more time on the platform. So these platforms have influence on our lives beyond what we can truly understand. We just don't think like that. We don't think like that. So I do think that Section 230 did need a review, and these platforms need to be held more accountable for the things that are on their platform. However, this is not the way to do it. This shoddy executive order that's not encouraging real discussion around tech companies and the influences that they have. It needs to have a discussion that is in-depth, unbiased, bipartisan. It cannot be done by the president as an executive order because he's mad that one of his tweets got labeled as potentially misleading. 99% of his tweets are potentially misleading. Trump is having a temper tantrum, and he needs to chill the fuck out and let the experts do this because it should be done. This is something that should be done 100%. These companies need to be held responsible for the reach and the influence that they have. So in summary, I do think that Section 230 needs to be reviewed, and I think that these companies need to be regulated, but this ain't it. This ain't it. So that has been today's Joe Show. If you like my content, please subscribe below. I upload one every single day. In the meantime, follow me on Instagram, Joe Show. And until tomorrow, read something good. This has been the Joe Show.